Welcome to Living from the Heart. I am your host, Tina Thrussell, also known as Woman Who Dances with Light. I am a spiritual healer, a NIA teacher, a certified sound wellness practitioner, a facilitator of workshops, retreats, and seminars, the host of women's nurture circles in Calgary, and a wife, a mother to a four-footed feline friend, and so many other things. I'm the co-founder of Best You Can Be, and most importantly, a messenger of the Shin Dao, the way of the heart, the way of living with love, kindness, and compassion. And I love Wednesday mornings and the Living from the Heart show because I have an opportunity to speak to truly amazing people who live from their hearts, like today's guest, Katie Turner. I met Katie at the beginning of the year when I was the MC at a spiritual networking YYC event. And our guest speaker for the day had a no-show because she was ill. And so I posed to the group, well, I can fill in. I just did a talk a couple of weeks ago, but is there anybody here in the room that would like to speak? And I was so impressed because I think it was Katie's first time to our group, and her hand shot up and said, yeah, I'll talk to the group. And she just took a minute to pull out her laptop, which she happened to be carrying. I think that synchronicity was spirit guiding us to have this happen. And she had an old talk on her laptop that she just used as sort of guidance for notes. And she really impressed me. When she started off saying that she was a registered psychologist, I thought, oh my God, what is she doing here? But it goes to show you should never judge anyone by their title, because she proved to be a very intuitive, heart-based woman who is very, very focused on whole health. And so it's my absolute delight to bring Katie Turner onto the show today.
Tina, thank you. I'm kind of laughing backstage with the psychologist comment.
It was kind of a funny circumstance, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was impressed with your talk. I loved the fact that you said that you really wanted to help people, and you went into this field of psychology and then began to recognize that the typical Western therapy methods on their own were really not that long-term effective. And so do you want to speak to how you ended up being in this space of blending East and West?
So yeah, it's been a long process kind of over the years, in the last decade or more. I think when I came out of kind of grad school and early work experience, there's a lot of focus on kind of conscious mind and behavior strategies, which can be really helpful. They're important to know, and sometimes they can be effective. But I also kind of found that just kind of deepening my own study, I ended up booking a one-way ticket to India. I spent almost a year there. I really started exploring more spiritual and intuitive approaches. And I really found that there was a lot missing from kind of the Western psychology. So I got more into approaches that really help target more subconscious and unconscious minds. So that might be, sometimes it's more kind of inner child healing. Sometimes it goes back into like ancestral work or even like past lives. I think all of us, and myself included, like have areas where you got stuck or you notice like self-sabotage happening. And our conscious, like rational mind can kind of see like this isn't a problem, like this is a problem, it's not really helping. Why do I keep doing this? And we kind of beat ourselves up over it, but we get stuck in the same patterns. And I really found that more trauma processing and approaches that really work with more of that subconscious or unconscious mind, like that's where we can really shift things and get the healing we need and really create new patterns and possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. How can we fix what we don't know is happening or there, right?
Yeah.
And we don't know what's happening in the subconscious. That's why it's called the subconscious.
For sure.
Right?
We usually have hints in our day-to-day life that we're in where things aren't working, and especially if it's not responding to like conscious mind strategies or to our best laid plans or goals, there's often something deeper there.
Yes. So what kind of strategies do you use then, or what do you suggest to clients, patients? What do you
I go clients because I'm really non-medical model. oriented. I think diagnosis can be helpful if it fits for people, if it gives them a helpful lens, but it also is like a living, breathing document that's updated all the time too. So I'm not super stuck on labels. I think it's only if it's helpful in that way.
Very good. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I think, well, my practice can look really different depending on who's coming in, what they're looking for, kind of what level they're at in their own work already. So, like you said, I do blend Western psychology and Eastern approaches. Some people are really looking for more of the intuitive and the deep dive because they've already done a lot of personal development work. They may have even been to therapy before, but they're really feeling like stuck and that they've hit kind of a conscious plateau. Oftentimes the blend is helpful too because it can be kind of that deeper processing, but also having tools and strategies. Like we still have to practice new communication skills. If we're setting boundaries or doing different things, like we still need that framework to really integrate the change on a day-to-day basis. A lot of the approaches I use are kind of really blending from like family constellations, which is working with ancestral soul history, but with individual work. I do a lot of energy psychology, so it's working with the body's meridian system, like the subtle energy pathways using acupressure, so it can be tapping on different points, which is actually like a really strongly evidence-based modalities. There's over 100 clinical studies already that show it's 3 times more effective for anxiety, depression, past trauma. Just did a workshop on emotional eating using energy psychology as well too, because there's more and more research there. It really helps like reset the body's stress response and dramatically reduces like cortisol and adrenaline levels.
And
So
how amazing that by simply tapping the energy meridians, we can avoid people getting into the whole pharmaceutical world where there are all kinds of side effects. And I mean, sometimes people are worse off for taking medication that's supposed to be helping them.
yeah, sometimes, but I would also like caution on that too, because especially within kind of spiritual realm, I find a lot of people really anti-medication, and sometimes it can be helpful as part of an overall treatment plan. So I'm really like non-judgmental on what needs to happen for people, but I think it's about exploring all your options and really like a combination of medication and therapy can be most helpful, but I kind of work with each person to see like what they're open to and what will best support them. But if someone's like really, really struggling or really deep in mental health things, sometimes medication as part of an overall treatment plan can help get them out. And I also just want to say like there's nothing unspiritual about needing medication if you do.
Very good. Thank you for pointing that out. And thank you, because you're right. There are a lot of people in the spiritual realm that are very anti-medication. And I know I was very much on that edge when I first stepped into this whole path.
Mhm.
But I began to see, like you, that sometimes things get deep enough that that medication can lift you up enough so that some of the other kinds of work can begin to help. And then it can
Mhm.
be a wean off of medication again. But you need that little uh, helping hand. A
For
Beatles song
sure.
comes to mind. What is it? Mother's Little Helper. Anyway,
Right.
um, so it's beautiful that you're open to all of that, just
Mhm.
open to whatever is the best option for whoever you're working with, rather than saying there's only this and there's only this.
Mhm.
And I think that is that where some of your intuitive leanings might come in, where you feel into what might be a better route for this person?
I don't advise on medication because that's outside of my scope. Like I'm not medically trained, so I can talk to people about like what might be coming into that decision, how might they know when it's time to talk to a doctor. But in terms of intuitive practice, I often use that more to help people really kind of narrow in on like what is below the surface, and to guide the deeper work that we do because I'm always tuned into the field as well too. So I use a combination of clinical experience as well as my own intuitive experience. And depending on how open clients are, like I'll ask permission for that to see if they want me to be more open with that or not. Because I can also kind of pick up on that stuff. Like I might know it's not theirs. Like I might have a sense of what's happening in the family history or even soul history. And that stuff's really hard to get to. Sometimes people can with I also do work that's similar to hypnosis where it is guiding people to connect with like their intuition themselves. Because I always want to teach people how to connect with their own intuition. Like I really believe in like teaching someone to fish rather than fishing
Mm.
for them. But that also can be a longer term process. And sometimes if there's like acute distress and there's a specific problem someone's in for, we can use energy psychology and other modalities to shift that energy, even if the person doesn't fully like connect with it
Makes sense.
themselves. Yeah. And so that's where I that's where the intuition piece can come in, is like helping get below the conscious mind.
Very good. Very good. So would you say that this is an absolute passion of yours, this work that you're doing?
Oh, definitely. I think it's calling and purpose, and I'm very grateful. It's been a long road to get here because for a while, I thought I'd have to leave psychology to do this work. So it took about 10 years of having one foot in each world and having an intuitive based practice and working as a psychologist, and then seeking out and finding other training and supervision where I could bring it in an evidence based way.
Wow, quite a process.
Yeah.
So here's a
I've
question for
dedicated my
you
life
that
to it.
comes out of left field.
Mhm.
Have you ever thought about guiding others into this path, like becoming a teacher of here's how you can do this?
You're perfect timing. It's not out of left field at all. I do it one-on-one right now. So I mean, I've done a bit of teaching kind of in my intuitive practice. I've done some workshop stuff, and I've done one-on-one coaching. So there are people I work with who aren't really coming necessarily for therapy, but they're really coming more for the intuitive part. And I do work with other therapists and healthcare professionals, or people who use it within their own work, even people in business or like who are running companies, like just to be more in tune with that side of themselves of, they have the logic, but what's this intuitive? Like, how do they navigate these unknown decisions? Because I think intuition is our greatest resource in the face of the unknown. Like, it won't tell us the whole story, but it will let us know like what's the right next step. And being able to know like what our own personal triggers are and like our own unconscious traumas is really essential in that, because we need to weed out like what is old fear versus like what is intuitive truth. And so I do a lot of that one-on-one, but I've definitely been getting that call and push. So you're really just confirming. Like, I'm trying to
Very
look
good.
into like how to do this on a bigger scale. So yes.
Very good, because what's coming to mind for me is the mass influence thing. Like working with one-on-one, there's no doubt every one person that we work with, there's a ripple out effect.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do with them ripples out to at least 9 other people because of how they interact with those people, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, if you're in a position where you can teach more people to do work the way you do this work,
Mm-hmm.
then they're helping how many clients one-on-one that ripple out to 9 more people. So we have a bigger coverage. And I see a real need for this, to understand the importance of blending to create holistic healing.
Mm-hmm.
Healing that works on what's going on inside as well as the symptoms on the outside. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm delighted to hear that you're leaning in that direction.
Yes. Thank you.
Very
And thank you
good.
for the nudge.
It's really funny because on last week's show, a question came to mind that I posed to my guest, and it was the same thing. She was like, "Oh my gosh, thank you for that. Yes, it's kind of been hanging there a little bit, and you just brought it out." So, this is the kind of intuition that we're talking about, those little nudges that we can pick up something that says, "Hmm, feels like this,"
Mm-hmm.
and that can make all the difference in the world for someone when you can see something that they can't see for themselves very clearly in that moment, or they've just started to look at but
Mm-hmm.
haven't had the full picture yet.
Oh yeah, it's been really on my radar. I'm looking into courses and things right now, so it's not like courses
Uh,
on how to build courses.
Beautiful. So this is just affirmation that you're on the
Perfect.
right path.
Mhm. Yeah,
Really
and
cool.
because I do a lot of work with like, I really specialize in working with empathic clients, so people who feel other people's energy or like are really affected by energy in the room or around others. Not everyone realizes they're empathic.
Mhm.
And I work a lot with like highly sensitive people, and I think there is a lot of intuitive gifts in our population as a whole. But for myself in this journey, it's like being an empath without knowing like what that is or how to do it. Our culture and society doesn't like teach us how to identify these kids or help them, and it feels a lot more like a curse. Like, I was really in a dark place really young and early on.
Mm.
But as I kind of developed in my own journey, and I didn't figure out I was an empath till after psychology, because the medical system and mental health system doesn't really acknowledge it's actually a real thing. And from my experience, I'm like, it definitely is,
Yes.
but people can take it or leave it. But oftentimes when we can, it's so essential, I think, especially for empaths, to know like what is our energy, what isn't. And I don't think, from what I've seen out there, there is more people talking about it. There are a lot of strategies about protecting your energy, but part that's really missing is like the deeper level work of like, how do we heal those subconscious parts so we stop taking on everyone else's energy? Like, I
Yes.
really think we are here to feel it and to like be a conduit and like send healing, but I don't think we're supposed to be this sponge that absorbs all the suffering and like is just processing it all at our own detriment. And I've found ways to navigate that over my own journey, and I help clients with that. But I think it's needed on a bigger scale because, especially with the pandemic and like mental health pandemic that's happening, like a lot of empaths are really struggling right now.
Oh, big time. Big time. This is really affecting a lot of people very, very deeply.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting what you said, because I am also, of course, very empathic.
Mm-hmm.
And at the beginning, I was just so involved. I had 5 different communities that were live that I was trying to pivot into online communities and keep everybody alive and going and connected. And I wasn't spending much time with me. I was actually putting in longer hours of volunteer hours in my days that I normally did
Mm-hmm.
actually doing any physical work. And I got sucked down into a really bad place. And I
Yeah.
didn't realize how much energy I'd picked up and
Mm-hmm.
how dark and dismal life was beginning to feel. Um, and I don't remember what it was that triggered me and pulled it out, but it was like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, really need to start doing my own practices for me
Mm-hmm.
because this is intense.
Yeah.
So yes, I know a lot of people were really deeply affected. And I love what you said, that there's a lot of talk about protecting yourself from others. But yes, how much more important to get to the source of stop taking it on and absorbing it.
Mm-hmm.
The source of the problem is, once you can look at that and address that, then you've got permanent change. You have actual transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I
Yeah, and
love,
it's a complicated piece with empathic stuff too, because it tends not to be one source. Like it's a lot of like deep subconscious beliefs kind of about ourselves and the world because we come in as little babies feeling everything and nobody teaches us how to navigate it. So a lot of us end up really like trying to help others because children are dependent on their parents. Like we need them to be okay to be okay. So it gets tied up into a lot of belief systems that we
yes,
need really tools to like help unravel some of that at like a deeper level.
absolutely true. Yes, yes, yes. Well, so are you able to share, and I know it's kind of out of context, but are you able to share some tips for people who are empathic, just in terms of coping until they can get to someone like yourself who can help
Mhm.
them un unravel and reveal the many layers of the source?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is kind of looking into it a little bit more to see, like, to find out, are you or aren't you? Like, could this possibly explain your experience? I often recommend some of Judith Orloff's work. She's a psychiatrist out of the US. So she has a book called The Empath Survival Guide. It is a lot of focus on kind of those like energy clearing and protection, but I do think it is that piece about really having time for yourself and time for your own energy and to recharge to make sure you're not kind of taking on everything for everyone. Inner child work can be helpful as a part of that process. And one thing is even just taking time to kind of check in when you're really feeling off, to really just ask yourself intuitively and see if it says kind of yes or no of like, is this mine? Is it not mine? I also add like a third one in there because I think it's important and it's not often talked about is like sometimes it can be like, is this mine and not mine? Because
Ah,
sometimes there's a part that is ours, but there can also be, we also could be picking up some stuff from other people or collectively.
that's an important third question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes, I'm always asking, is this mine or someone else's?
Yeah.
Hmm, and I have been caught in that. Oh, it's both. It's like
Yeah.
30% mine and 70% somebody else's. Oh, oh. So there's
Yes.
some stuff for me to work on here as well as let go of their stuff.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
really more about like getting out of the rational mind and really more anything that can help bring you into your body and really check in like what are those subtle sensations because empathic is really more of like an intuitive gift of really sensing like but we sense it through our own bodies like through physical sensations or emotions so we really have to be in our body and really be checking in with our body and noticing those subtle shifts.
Paying attention is important.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, um, in that respect, mindfulness actually plays a great
Mhm.
role in what you're recommending for how people live, right?
Mhm.
To be present to the moment, present to what's going on with me right now.
Mhm.
Without that presence of being aware of this moment,
Yeah.
how can we begin to tune in and tap in?
Well, a lot of in terms of mindfulness practice, it's really kind of found that the more like regular practice, even if it's shorter, is really more helpful. So it can just be those. I think it has to work for each person in terms of their day-to-day life and routine, but often in terms of behavior change, if you can link it to something that you're kind of already doing, it's easier to get a new habit and practice.
Mhm.
Some people like some of the apps that are available on their phones. For some, it might just be setting kind of a timer. If someone's really kind of in a busy headspace and really overthinking and really stressed, sometimes dropping into like silent sitting and or like watching thoughts or watching breath can be too quick of a change
Mhm.
or too much of a forced slowdown. So it might be bringing mindfulness to an activity, like maybe they like working out or walking. Some people find like cleaning and just really being present, cleaning helpful. Like it's whatever kind of brings your attention to the present moment and just keep noticing the thoughts stray, thinking about the future or the past. Just every time you catch it and bring it back, you're back in the moment. So it's really that
Absolutely.
even like 10 or 15 minutes a few times a week is helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, if it becomes a daily practice, like you said, linking it to something that you already
Mm,
do,
mhm,
a concrete example might be every time I get behind the steering wheel, I just take a moment, feel my hands on the steering wheel, feel my feet on the floor of the car, feel the seat, like just be
mhm,
really present to everything before I even start the car and drive.
mhm,
And that can bring that presence into my day several times as I'm in and out of the car, right?
mhm.
So those kinds of examples of bringing it into everyday
For
everyday life,
sure.
everyday
Yeah,
practice.
and for people who are more sensitive or empathic, I'd usually kind of recommend that there's some kind of check-in and almost like protection, like whether it's like envisioning kind of light coming from your heart and filling up your whole area that you can connect with other people, but not take on stuff that isn't yours or isn't helpful. Something like that before you go out in the day and some kind of check-in when you come back to really like release any energy that isn't yours. Like that might be a bath or a shower. It might be just picturing yourself like hollow space and having it run through. With any kind of relaxation technique or energy hygiene technique, you have to experiment with a few and find what works for you. So don't be afraid to try a few times. If it's really not fitting, like move on and try a different one.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I always say to people when it comes to mindful techniques, there's no such way as the wrong way to do it. There's only what feels right, what
Mhm,
feels good. If it feels good and right, and if it's not how somebody taught you to do it, that's okay
mhm.
because it's about what works
Yeah.
for you.
For sure, and with mindfulness, like, sometimes it doesn't feel good at all because it's if we have a lot of stuff going on, like, it's hard to sit with it. Like, sometimes it actually is okay if we sit down and it, like, really feels awful because we can run from things and end up being really busy so we don't sit with what we're actually feeling. But
Mm,
those emotions can be important to show us, like, what does need to be processed, what isn't working, what needs
gr-
attention.
great point. Yeah, yeah. Well, if we want to grow, we have to get uncomfortable now and then, right?
Mhm.
It's the only way to learn and grow is to get a little uncomfortable, to push outside of what is familiar and comfortable.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know, you're a mother of a young one,
Mhm.
and how does your passion for your work show up in your parent role?
Oh boy, yeah. Well, I sensed her for years before she was even on the radar, like, that I could feel her, like, every day when it was getting close, like, on a spirit level more, so I knew we had an agreement that she would be my kid in this life. And I think it's helpful too because I had a sense of, like, what she'd be like, so I feel like it's a lot easier and also, like, I think professionally wise too, I've done so much of my own personal work. It's not that I'm still doing it, but I feel like I had a really good foundation of not really knowing what works for me and letting go of a lot of the shoulds and the olds. I think women and, like, mothers in particular, there's a lot of old, like, childhood and, like, generational conditioning of, like, what we're supposed to be, and this kind of piece of, like, doing all the emotional labor, doing all the work, like, so many moms and women really struggle with guilt for just taking time for themselves.
Mm,
So I feel like being on this path was helpful for me because I feel like I did a lot of that work that I see a lot of moms really having to do, like, once they have kids and they're just nothing left for themselves.
Yeah.
And what we kind of have seen statistically with the pandemic is women have been disproportionately affected, especially moms and like working moms. So I think it's just kind of any of that work that can help us like drop any of the old shame and guilt and almost like patriarchal gender roles.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
and it
sure.
also helps to be able to be in the moment and be regulated too, like know when you're getting triggered, because our kids will kind of trigger stuff for us that we can kind of separate that, like park it. It's not about being perfect, but kind of being the best we can, and it can be hard when little ones are escalated, like to maintain our own regulation. So that's definitely been helpful.
That's good. That's good. So, can you give us, say, any of the moms who are out there watching, can you give them a tip or two of what can you do when you're in that place where child is escalated, screaming, yelling, being, and you just want to scream and yell right back at them? How do you
Yeah.
not go there?
Well, it's hard when you're already kind of flooded. So if you're already in fight or flight, it's really hard to kind of implement something. So I think it can be about like practicing kind of taking those breaths, setting those intentions in the day. There's also that piece of like the more overwhelmed we are in general, it's harder. Sometimes it is that just like that last piece in the bucket where it's like I'm gonna lose it now because it's really not about this incident. It's about like all the things that are happening. So I think for a lot of parents right now and moms, like working moms especially, like there's just so much pressure overall. I think it's helpful to kind of take a step back and look at the bigger picture. I was interviewed recently for like a bigger news outlet that was doing a piece on like tips for moms. They didn't end up publishing it because I don't think they liked my approach as much. But I was like, I'm really sick of all these articles that are like tips for working from home and entertaining your kids. Like this is actually like possible. Or like you just like if you schedule it right and get the right activities, this is going to be easy. It's like this, and this was when schools were shut down, daycares were shut down, and like everyone's working from home when the pandemic first hit.
Yeah.
And like, pardon my language, but I'm like, it's bullshit. Like this is not. So my kind of approach too is like, what is everything that's going on, and like, is this a reasonable expectation for anyone else? Like, would you expect any other woman, a friend, someone you love, to be able to do all these things and do it well? And
Mm.
are there places where you can get support? Are there places where some things just don't get done or like don't get done well because survival and you're important too? Like your mental well-being is maybe more important than a clean kitchen
Yes.
or not having takeout every night. Like, so it's kind of finding like what can give, what support is possible, and cutting yourself slack, like being compassionate.
Mm, that's beautiful. And that right there, that's what impressed me in your talk, and that's what made me want you to be on the show, is that you're willing to call, that's just bullshit. Nobody can do that. So let's be real about this and look at what can we really do.
Hmm.
And that's beautiful. Yeah. Set some new new priorities. What can you let go of? What can you get help with? Like, because you can't do it all, so stop trying because you're going to make
Mhm.
yourself crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, like, I'll talk with parents too to be like, it's like what we know, kids really learn like what we do a lot too. So a lot of us,
Mm.
like, it's not like our own moms wanted us to do all the things, but we saw them doing all the things and really putting themselves last. So part of it can be sometimes we can use that like mother instinct to be like, if we don't want to pass this down and it's not putting pressure on us, we all do the best we can. Our kids, like, we can normalize therapy, we can normalize getting help to make them more likely. There's going to be things we're all going to do that it's not going to be perfect for our kids. But I think that there's that other piece too of really like, sometimes it can be helpful to be like, what do we want to model for them? Like, what do you really want to teach them? And we might do that for us, for them,
Yes.
if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. I actually offered that advice, although I don't often give advice, but I actually offer advice through questioning, right? As a coach, I asked her, I said, so would you want your daughter to hold back her emotions and not let you know how she's really feeling to
Hmm.
protect you? And she go, well, no, absolutely not. And I said, so that why are you doing that to her?
Yeah.
How can she learn that it's okay to be open and share that if you're not willing to do that?
Hmm.
And she was like, I'm gonna have to think about that. Oh,
Yeah,
it was
for
kind of
sure.
like a in the face, like, whoa, okay.
Mhm.
So
definitely. And with that one on a like developmentally appropriate level, like we don't want to like unload like it's we're their friend or listeners, but it's kind of that like, yeah, this is hard, but I've got it. It's okay. I'm gonna cry. But I'm
yeah,
gonna be okay.
yeah, exactly. I mean,
Mm.
yes, our conversation did flow around that too, because it would be irresponsible to say, well, you should just let your kids know how you're feeling all the time. We're talking about age appropriate, situation appropriate. Yeah, there's so much that goes around that. But yeah, as a general, we have to model what we
Yeah.
want our children to learn for sure. So, golly, here we are at 9:30 already. So, I want to put your website on the screen so that if anyone who listens to this live or to the audio podcast after or watches the replays, here's how you can get a hold of Katie if you're interested in taking a look at some of what she's talking about. If you're feeling stuck in some areas of life and you know there's something deeper going on and you want some help uncovering what that something is, then by all means, take a look at her website, see if it feels like she's a fit. Katie is a very real person who has a lot of that educational background and enough of the heart and intuition to make it a nice balance where you're going to feel like you're working with a human being and not some specialist who knows more than you and looks down their nose at you. So if that appeals to you, by all means, I invite you to talk to Katie. And are you open to having um, introductory, like, let's just talk and see if we're a fit for each other kind of conversations with people?
I am. I do have like a lot of it's kind of on my website because I've had it redone recently to really kind of streamline things. So like all the most frequently asked questions are there. A lot of like my specializations, areas I work with are all there. So it's really easy to kind of find that way. Just because of like working single mom in a pandemic stuff, like to do consultation calls, I do book up like probably about 4 to 6 weeks ahead for those. So it's easier to get in for an appointment. Just because I kind of put like current client needs first with that. But emailing, I'm pretty good with. Like I'm usually within 48 hours, I can get back to people by email as
Okay,
well.
well, then it's great that you've got this commonly asked questions, right?
Mhm.
Very likely. I mean, we are all the same as human beings. We have the same issues. We all want the same things. So if somebody else has asked the question, I mean, if you have the question to ask, somebody else has probably asked it. So checking out that Q&A first before booking a session would probably be really, really wise. And kudos to you for doing that. So here we are at the close of the show. Is there any final words that you would like to offer?
No, thank you for having me here. It was really great to chat with you this morning.
Yeah, well, and it was great to get your perspective, your refreshing perspective on what people can do to help themselves just live a more easeful life, I would say, is the bottom line of all of that. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm going to say ciao for now. I'll be back next Wednesday morning with another Katie. So tune in either at Shindell, The Way of the Heart on Facebook or our YouTube channel, Best You Can Be. For now, ciao for now, and we'll
Thank
see you
you.
next week. Oops, I know. I want to finish by letting people know where they can see that stuff. So you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, as I mentioned, Best You Can Be. And you can go to our blog and check out podcast.bestyoucanbe for the audio podcasts. So many ways to catch the replay or any of the other great videos. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.